Grace the Archbishop, who gave us a very down-to-earth liturgy today. The family of our fallen brother, Justice Kanyeihamba, political leaders, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, our two retired Right Honorable Prime Ministers, ministers here, judicial officers, ladies and gentlemen. Last Wednesday, we honored Justice Kanyeihamba on the grounds of the Supreme Court, and I made a speech. I do not intend to make another one now. Might sound like a broken record, but I want to make some two or so remarks. In the African setting, I am very African, so you'll forgive me. In the African setting, when you go to a village and you do not find elders around, or you do not find these children who run naked in the village, not yours in town, in the village, who run naked, then you have reason to worry about the future of that village. The absence of elders means the citizens, the dwellers of that village do not have guidance. And then when you do not have these small children who run with food, matoke, cassava, peanut soap, simsimodi, that is pasted in their hand, it means there's no future for that village because there are no inheritors. So today, we both celebrate and mourn the passing on of Justice Kanyeihamba. As an elder, he had a role, and that's why he did very well. He really did very well as an elder. We all know he spoke his mind, was quite candid. There are people in this country, many, who also purport to speak their minds, or who actually make an effort to speak their minds. The difference between Kanyeihamba and them is that Kanyeihamba spoke from conviction, and he spoke substance. There are many people who we hear, I hear, I don't want to speak for you, I hear them speak. They speak because they seek relevance. That was not Kanyeihamba, and that was distinguished him from the other persons who would otherwise stain the high moral ground he attained. People like Kanyeihamba do not have in their mind, they have no time for conspiracies. People who speak candidly never stab you from behind. They're not cowards. Actually, the Kanyeihambas of this world, even before he opens his mouth, you look at his forehead and you know what he's going to say. If he's in agreement, you know. If he's not in agreement, you know what is coming is not in agreement with the position I hold. And then the beauty of being a Kanyeihamba is that when you disagree with him, you still respect what he has said. That is the beauty of how you hold him. Many times I disagreed with him, but I respect the views he had. And many times I agreed with him. My interface with Kanyeihamba. One, I was a young lawyer, should have been around 89, 90. He was the Minister of Justice, Attorney General. And there were these people captured during the war, former soldiers, and it included those who had never held a gun in their hand, the hazards of war. So they were put in prison, upper prison, they were lodgers. There was no legal basis, so you could not describe them as remandees, they were lodgers. So this young lawyer, myself, now writes to the Attorney General of Uganda, referring to his constitutional attributes and so on and so forth, and to advise the government to release these people who are unlawfully being held. He wrote back to me saying, I've been trying to look for, the file must be somewhere. I just opened that as a lawyer, you ought to know what to do. That's how he wrote to me. I thought in writing to the Attorney General, I was doing what I ought to do. So purpose for that application, for that person who was released, without telling me in so many words, he had guided me. Fast forward, and for me, this is the indelible positive mark of Justice Kanyeihamba in my mind. In the Constituent Assembly, 94, 95, he chaired the legal and drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly, of which I was a member. What then, because now this was at close quarters, what struck me about the then professor, honorable professor without the justice, because he hadn't become a judge, was his understanding of the law. Many people do understand the law, but also his understanding and rendering the language of the law. That's where he was superb. Because what the assembly had resolved had to be reduced into articles, clauses, paragraphs of the draft constitution. And you would see he was at peace with himself in rendition, diction, and the right legal framing, and so on. That one won my admiration. But I think it's one of his greatest contributions. I've spoken about this elsewhere a number of times. We all know when colonialism came, one of the gravest inequities colonialism left with us was the land issue, inequities in land holding. Here they created Milo, and by the stroke of the pen, those who owned land became worse than squatters, became bibanja holders, and so on and so forth. You are a debtor, you're just pegged to the land. I think here, Bunyoro, Toro, and I think Angole. I don't know whether they call them Mailu in every location of those places. In the greater part of Uganda, land became crown land. And even when we won independence in 1962, instead of liberating the people from the loss of land, all that land was converted into public land. So people who were on public land were worse than Bibanja holders. They were actually more vulnerable than even squatters. Squatters were protected. The licensees, the people who believed they were staying on ancestral land, could be displaced by anyone from within or from out, paying token, I'm completing, paying token compensation and given 6 months to vacate the land. And it did happen. One of my sworn duty to come to the Constituent Assembly was to fight the iniquities about land. And when I said we should raise customary land tenure at the level of Milo, at the level of Friol, and liberate the people of Uganda from that bondage, the first two people to immediately agreed in Select Committee 1, where I was chairing the debate on land, was Dr. Okule Park and Professor Kanyeihamba. And the people of this country need to thank the Uganda. Then we recruited Professor Sente Zakajubi and Yuri. So with regard to land, people who were enslaved on public land only got their independence in 1995. Thanks to my elder, Professor Kanyeihamba. So I thought I would make this remark, and again, Your Grace, you make two of us, maybe we're more. This practice of chief mourner, in my Acholi tradition, the chief mourner is the brother of my mother. the one to whom you have to account for my death. Really explain. That tells you the strong string of linkages between maternity and the society where you belong. So I agree. Who loses a dead person more than his grandchildren, more than his spouse, more than his children? These are the chief mourners. The ones, especially the grandchildren, they will only read much later what their granddad was or what their grandmom was. So I am with you on this. Let us not pick practices which have no basis and just say chief mourner. Even when I've shed no tears at all, I must be a chief mourner. That's not understandable. So otherwise, thank you so much for this. We've come to both thank God for Justice Professor Kanyeihamba, and also mourn because Uganda's lost. People like the Kanyeihambas are necessary in society because they sober society. They sober the governance of each country or each society. Those who think the Kanyeihambas
my Lord, the Chief Justice, who has just been on the podium, the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Ministers present, the former Prime Ministers, all the distinguished mourners here. I recognize the family of Professor Kanyeihamba and Your Grace, the Archbishop and the clergy. In the interest of time, let me say, all of you, friends and distinguished mourners, the judicial spokesperson had said I am Honorable Sempija, but my name is Chris Baryomunsi. I am the Minister in charge of Information, Communications Technology and National Guidance, the government of Uganda, and the National Vice Chairperson for NRM in charge of Western Uganda, and the Member of Parliament for Chinchizi East in Kanungu. The easier way to know where I come from, you say, I come from the district where Honorable Mama Mbabazi comes from. I have been requested by HE, the President, to represent him at this Requiem service and deliver his short condolence message. But before I read his written message, let me say, by coincidence, I am a Muchiga, like Professor Kanyeihamba. We hail from the same area. And also, in terms of our clans, I am a clanmate to Professor Kanyeihamba. We are Bagabira. And we are very proud as a Bagabira that Professor Kanyeihamba was the first Mugabira to go to Parliament of Uganda. And I was the second to go to Parliament. The third is Honorable Musasizi, who is the current Member of Parliament for Professor Kanyeihamba. I think there is a fourth young man from Rubabo, Naboth. So there are only 4 Bagabira who have ever been members of Parliament. And now that I remain the most senior Mugabira in terms of politics. That aside, I convey condolences to the family, the people of Kigezi, Ugandans, and the international community, because Professor Kanyeihamba is a subject in himself. If you asked any one of you to speak about Professor Kanyeihamba, you can take even 2-3 days speaking about him, because much as he was born in Muchiga, but he became an international citizen, and he has impacted the whole international community, and we shall greatly miss him. I just want to summon your collective consensus that I use some words to describe him and see whether I am correct. If you talk about Professor Kanyeihamba, honesty, being honest, does that describe Professor Kanyeihamba? Yes, I see collective approval. Incorruptible. Yes, correct. A straight talker, somebody who talks straight, fearless, and courageous. Yes, I see signs of approval. Principled, sticking to his principles, whatever what, but a principled man. I see approval. Truthfulness. Okay, the same as honesty, but being truthful. Some people, but Professor Kanyeihamba was truthful in the way he handled public life, even private life. Correct? Integrity. Well, you can say the same as incorruptible, but a man of high integrity. I see, yes. Intelligent. I could go on and go on and go on. One time in Parliament, I tried to say all Bachiga have these attributes, and people say, no, these attributes must be personal. Don't ethnicize them and make them general. But some of these speak to the character of the true Bachiga. That I can say. And we are proud of Professor Kanyeihamba as a senior Muchiga who led the way, and many of us who are younger than him, we admired him, he inspired us. We always prayed and worked hard to be like Professor Kanyeihamba, but I'm sure many of us still have to work hard to reach and be where Kanyeihamba reached. So we greatly miss him, and we shall forever cherish his work and legacy. And you could add many other attributes: hardworking, very humorous. If we had time, we would go into that, but we shall have time later at the vigil and maybe tomorrow to speak more about Professor Kanyeihamba. So abachiga bagabira abaruganya amasizi itwenda okubasasira kandi mwebale kwija okushendekereza muzeyi wetu Professor Kanyeihamba. Ebi bibagaho twena abajwira amagara obuhire nibuhika ruhanga sitwara mwenu muhumule kandi ekihora ekyazaho abo kufeegwa Professor ruhanga neija okukizuza. I was just giving words of comfort to the people from his home in Nyamasizi, Rwanda, that the gap created by the death of Professor Kanyeihamba will be filled by our Lord, because we are believers. Having said those few remarks, permit me to turn to the message which is written from H.E., the President. Of course, as we all know, he visited the family and had time to speak to members of the family, and also he granted an official burial, and he allowed me to come and be here, and then later join him in cabinet, because today is cabinet day. So the family of the late Professor George Kanyeihamba, the clergy and fellow mourners, condolence message. Once again, on behalf of the government of Uganda, on behalf of the NRM party, and on behalf of all Ugandans, I wish to extend heartfelt condolences to the family of the late Professor George Kanyeihamba. I commiserate with his colleagues in the legal fraternity. He excelled as a lawyer, a scholar, and a judge. His writings and landmark rulings over the years are a great treasure to the present and future generations. I salute Professor Kanyeihamba's contribution during the 1981-86 war, which salvaged Uganda from state collapse. He was part of our external committee that was mobilizing support in the diaspora. Eventually, when the NRA captured power, he served in the government as a minister, and at one time, he represented Rwanda in the Parliament of Uganda. Therefore, we are not only mourning the death of Professor Kanyeihamba, but we are also celebrating his great legacy, which must be carried forward by his children, grandchildren, and his former students and admirers. May the soul of Professor George Kanyeihamba rest in eternal peace. Signed, YKM7, President of the Republic of Uganda, dated 28th July 2025. I will hand over this letter to the family for your family records, but the President has also given me a personal contribution of 10 million shillings to support the family in the funeral arrangement. Obviously, he had already authorized an official burial, and the expenses for the funeral arrangements will be made by the state. So this is his personal contribution towards the arrangements for the final send-off of our dear brother. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you very much.
Rest in eternal peace.
Thank you very much. We will now stand for the national anthem.